As the great Einstein once said, this is spooky action at a distance. Yeah. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Jabulani Ori, artist extraordinaire, and I love to talk about the visuals of things. This week, we have a recommendation from my friend, my dear good friend, who is like a brother to me. I love this guy, my friend Nemesis, code name Nemesis. And to be honest, I gotta give a little shout out to him, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have anything to talk about this week. Sometimes I find myself in a mental conundrum when it comes to deciding what to talk about on this channel, and he helps clarify that for me. So I gotta give a shout out to him. I know he's gonna see this. I love you, brother. I love you. Anyway, this week we're going to talk about Apple TV's Dark Matter, a sci-fi show dealing with the quantum anxiety we all face. A few disclaimers before I get into the visuals of this show. One, I am not a movie buff, TV buff, or show buff, or a buff of anything. I am just an artist who happens to be a gamer that loves to talk about the visuals in movies and TV shows. Disclaimer number two, I will not be spoiling the story of this show. I will only be talking about what the show is about, but not the intricate details of what goes on, because I would like to save that for you guys. I highly recommend watching this show, especially if you are into sci-fi like me. And the last disclaimer, and this one's kind of sad, guys. And this is one of the reasons why I do not like TV shows, I have one episode left from this show. It drives me nuts. It drives me crazy. It drives me up a wall when I watch a show, especially when I sit down to binge a show and it seems as if all the episodes are there, but you get to the end and you realize, wait a minute, something don't seem right. Something's missing from this story. Oh yeah, a conclusion, because there happens to be another episode left, right? That drives me absolutely. I mean, imagine playing a game, right? You're getting all the way up to the last boss and they haven't released the last boss for the game yet. So you're just sitting there in limbo for weeks or days, hours, seconds, whatever, right? Stress, man. Stress. Okay, so there's one episode left. It comes out Wednesday, and I decided, because I already saw most of the show and I enjoy the show, I don't think the show can go wrong, but I might be wrong. The conclusion might be some ass, but we'll see, you know. But I feel like I have a general consensus about the overall visuals in the show, so I can talk about it. You know what I mean? Okay. So, number one, the city. Chi-Town, Chicago. You know what I mean? So, I've only been to Chicago for a few hours, so I'm not well versed in the city, but I've heard good things about it. The thing about this show, because we're dealing with the quantum, right? This puts Chicago in an infinite position when it comes to the probability of how it appears to us. This Chicago is not going to be our Chicago, the Chicago that we know in this dimension. Because Dark Matter deals with issues pertaining to the quantum, the creators of the show have the liberty to portray Chicago in any way they see fit, and I think that adds character to the city. The reason why I'm saying that, and the reason why this inspired me a lot, is because I thought it was very interesting seeing the different visual representations for one city because of this quantum fluctuation that the story put us in. At some parts, Chicago is like Minnesota, icy, cold, frigid, cold some more, right? I happen to live in Minnesota, so I felt like that was a silent shout out to us Minnesotans. Another time, it's Chicago dark and dreary. You know what I mean? Another time, it's beautiful, sunny, almost seems like a utopia. I really appreciate seeing Chicago in so many different visual facets or visual styles. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, if it were me, if I was at the helm of the show or the creator of the show, I would go way out there. Like, I would have like sentient buildings, and I'll just do some weird stuff, right? And that is because of Rick Sanchez, to be honest. But for the most part, I really thought they did a fantastic job displaying or showing Chicago in the different dimensions. I thought that was fascinating. It's a real twist on the mind, just like quantum physics or anything quantum. Quantum is spooky, as Einstein said. Visual thing number 2, the box. Now, this thing, it's very eerie, right? And I can't figure out for the life of me why anyone would ever step into something that looks like this box. This thing is heavy and foreboding. It is a giant black box that looks as if it was welded together by some drunk alien or some evil entity. This black box looks like a obelisk of pain. This thing is so ominous. It actually reminds me of A Space Odyssey. That's one of the greatest movies to ever grace this reality. The black box, or the black rectangle, I don't even know what it's called. I told you my terms are sometimes off, right? But the black object in that movie, I'm sure, was inspiration behind this thing, right? But this thing is more horrific. And the cool thing about this box, aside from luring in different variants of our characters, right, is when you step inside the box, right? One of the coolest things that happen, and I think this is so fascinating. They can visually show what superpositioning would look like, and it's a visual that's not that complicated. Like, we can kind of pull off this visual. All you have to do is stand in front of a mirror, put a mirror behind you, and look down an infinite corridor of infinity. I remember doing this as a kid and kind of freaking out, like, what if all of these reflections was a different world, right? But I didn't know anything about quantum back then, but I remember seeing that kind of visual of the infinite hallway. Try it. It's kind of creepy. But in the show, the way they show us superpositioning, to me, it was a very smart way, because a lot of times in these shows, as in the 3-body problem, which I actually enjoyed, when they start talking about things to do with the quantum, it's very incomprehensible. So the fact that this show, Dark Matter, made that visually simple, right? Not to say it's a simple theory, but visually it's easier to understand. Another thing that this box reminds me of was a Netflix documentary I watched called, what is it called? Infinite, Help Needed. Come here, my sweet child. I need your assistance. 1 second. What's the name of the Netflix documentary the science woman watched? That's it. Good. A Trip to Infinity. Thank you, my lovely daughter. Yeah, my daughter had to come through on the clutch. A Trip to Infinity. That was a documentary that I watched. And in that documentary, they talk about the Infinite Hotel, right? In this documentary, they show a infinite hallway, but it's in the style of like a 1950s cartoon. So that's also pretty dope. But in Dark Matter, the box is eerie. It is creepy, and I feel like it is very effective, because when I think about the quantum and infinity and anything being possible, it really kind of puts you in a deep state of dread, almost as if you're in limbo, because the hallway never ends. It just keeps going on, both sides, So this box, I feel like, should be banned and barred from ever existing anywhere outside of the show. I'm just saying. And you know what's weird about this box? It's in sharp contrast to the fleeting quantum particles that it's supposed to be interacting with, right? Because when I think of quantum, I think of freedom. But when I look at this box from the show, I think of imprisonment, I think of bondage, I think of weight, I think of the end. This box, it shouldn't exist. It's just that simple. The third thing that I really loved about this show, and it's something very subtle, but very effective. because we're dealing with the quantum, of course, we're going to have variation of characters. Now, this show does something very smart. Instead of going over the top, like most shows about quantum does, which I don't mind, right? Over the top is fine because, we can have donut clouds. One of the things I like is the fact that it kind of stayed in the realm of reality, but not really because it's science fiction. So the show, when they're showing a variant of a character, they're changed the slightest thing. And because they changed that slightest thing, they almost feel like a totally different character, right? Whether it's just dyeing the hair a different color, adding a scar here or on the forehead, because we as human beings, we're really good at identifying one distinct human being from another in most cases, right? We as the viewer easily pick up on that, right? I remember one character actually gains weight in his variant, and it wasn't a lot of weight. He wasn't like obese or anything. He just added a little bit more fluff around the face, and that made him look almost completely different, right? But it was the same character, right? It was the same variant. He just had a little bit more weight. One of the worst examples of this is showing one of our characters in a sickly, diseased state, right? And again, it was so subtle. Make the skin a little pale, do a little something with the eyes, boom, you look like you are officially dying. And you know what? The show plays on what happened in our reality a few years ago. You know what I mean? That pestilence that came down on planet Earth. We all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, the disease character, that was one of the most heart-wrenching things that I've seen in a show in a long time. And I'm not going to say anything. You got to watch the show. All right. So honorable mentions. Honorable mentions. I got my 3 things that I really like. Honorable mentions. I really like the intro of this show. And that's one of the things that sometimes I'll come on here and I talk about shows and I never mention the intro. The intro here, it's really good. And I would recommend you not skip the intros if you haven't seen this show before. Don't skip the intro. The intro subtly changes, right? I'm glad I didn't skip it. It subtly changes as the show goes on. And the season finale is coming out in a few days, which is actually before this video comes out, but I've already watched it. My future self, I hope, right? I feel like they're going to do something special with the intro, and I hope they do. Now, of course, every show has their nicks and knacks, right? Every show got that little thing visually that's kind of, I gotta kind of dislike. And for Dark Matter, one of the things that I noticed, and it's a small thing, it's a very small thing, sometimes scenes has a green screen streamer look. Now, I don't know the budget for the show. I'm assuming it's a pretty good chunk of change, but sometimes the lighting in the show screams green screen. And I know it's a green screen because, they have to do it because they can't really put these actors and actresses in danger. But this particular scene that I am talking about, there was no danger anywhere, right? It was actually a soft, subtle scene with a pleasant sunshine. And if you watch the show, you probably know what I'm talking about. It takes place in a high rise. And I just felt like, man, come on, man, this is a really emotional scene. We need to get this lighting right. And it was a great scene too. Great sequence of events. But that's the one little nitpick I can see so far. So reality is created by the observer's subconscious. Be careful what you're thinking, my people. For those of you who already forgot who I am, my name is Jabulani Ori, artist extraordinaire. You can find all my work on my website, jahbu.com. If you use social media, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok and Threads at JAHBU_ART. Jabu_art. Next week, I have no idea again what I'll be watching. I'm gonna just pick something. Feel free to leave your comment in the comment section below. I will definitely be reading all of them. And if you have any recommendations for any shows, horror / sci-fi is what I tend to dabble with these days. Please leave it in the comment section. Aside from that, you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, wonderful month, wonderful year, wonderful life. No. Aside from that, I will see you later, my wonderful people. One love. Peace.